Welcome, Dr. Madhuri Singh, ma'am, to Kathmandu School of Law.
So thank you so much.
So, first of all, I would like to ask you a question regarding your experience with Sati because you're always associated with Sati. So, I'll begin my interview with a question on Sati.
Thank you so much. Yeah, Sati is very close to my heart, and I would love to talk about Sati. We started Sati in 1992, a group of us from the same school, same social background, and we identified our working area initially as women's issues, but as we learned across the way, we focused our uh, topic on domestic violence. And in the 1992s, you know, people did not know what violence against women was. First and foremost, it was denied.
Mm.
When we talked about violence against women, the society would say, "What violence? There is no violence against women in Nepal. We are a very peaceful society." So we came up with a study on sexual violence, sexual abuse on the roads of Kathmandu, and that gave us that opened the avenue for us to go into the private lives of women. So, with a pilot study, we proved that there was a lot of domestic violence within Nepali families. So, we focused our work on domestic violence. And of course, initially there was a lot of denial, there was a lot of criticism as well, as boarding educated women bringing in Western ideas into Nepali culture. But once it was proved through our researches, which came up out in 1997, situational analysis of violence against women in Nepal, people did believe that there's a lot of violence against women in Nepal in all spheres, and irrespective of their class, caste, educational qualification, and all that. So that is how Sati has been working on activities based on evidence based researches. And though the research came in 1997, before that, also through our own interactions with people, we had a lot of individuals coming to Sati once they came to know that Sati is an organization working on against violence. A lot of women would come to us, share their plight with us, and say that they some of them needed just a place to come and share their woes, but some of them needed place to come and stay. So in 1995, we started our first shelter for victim women and children of domestic violence. And initially, there was resistance to that as well. But as women came to know about the shelter services that we have, we started getting many, many cases of women victims of domestic violence. And the shelter, having the shelter in was a boon in the sense that, initially women would go to their families, to their friends and all, and they would still be blamed of, where did you go, where did you spend the night, who did you spend the night with. But when they came to an organization, we were their protectors. So that is how we started our shelter also. And then simultaneously, like Sati followed this mandate of the World Health Organization: awareness first, support systems, then men, legal remedies, and engaging men. So Sati has followed all the four steps of the World Health Organization to move forward. And yeah, after the shelter, we also advocated for the domestic violence law in Nepal. So initially, Sati, Salad, and LAC. We were three organizations that first drafted the ABC of domestic violence. Then later on, we had other organizations also join in. And so now we have the law also on domestic violence, preventing domestic violence.
So I think as a like you call yourself women movement participant rather
Yeah,
than calling as a social activist, I would
yeah,
say. So you have mixed your academic as well as practical aspects, because you have done a PhD in
yeah,
an area that is very much relevant for
yeah,
women's rights,
yeah,
right? So maybe you have tried to fill the legal lacuna also in that,
yeah.
in that sense. So can you tell us like how you have brought or juxtaposed both academic as well as practical aspects?
Okay, I think that's a very relevant question in the sense that, with Sati, I trained almost 4 to 5 thousand individuals from over 60 districts on what violence against women is, on domestic violence, and all that. And those days it was easier in the sense that people had not understood the topic itself. So once we started explaining, and then we also categorized the types of violence and all that. And like I told you, when we started our shelter, a lot of women would come, and even during my training sessions at different districts, there were women who would come with their stories. So that encouraged me to study uh, more about the issue of violence, because it was, if I had dealt with so many cases of violence issues within the shelter, and also heard stories about these women from the field, it was just justifiable for me to bring out their voice. It was bringing out the voice of the voiceless, for that matter, because till then it was, domestic violence was a shrouded issue. So it was breaking the silence on violence, and the women who came to the shelter, it was just my tribute to them for breaking the silence and being the voice of the voiceless, because it was taking guts even among these women, and a realization that they would no more tolerate violence. So I did my PhD based on the cases that came to Sati. You know, maybe over 1,000 cases I dealt with myself individually. But for my PhD, I used very, very severe cases, 150 severe cases, and also my personal interviews with people. So uh, that always encouraged me to bring it out in the academic field as well. So as a trainer, I would say, I have always enjoyed teaching, but I would not say this is a teaching as such, but an orientation and an interaction to hear from others and to learn from others, and also to share my own experiences from my research. I won't want to say it's my personal opinion, it's from the research that I have learned. For instance, I'll just give you simple examples of how women who break silence regarding violence in their lives are re-victimized. For instance, one small example is, uh, we talk about the community, because when a woman faces violence, she needs to be supported by the family, by the community, and by the state, right?
Yeah.
But in terms of family, most of the time it is the family that is creating violence. So let's count out the family. But even in terms of community, what my research showed was, community sympathizes with the woman, but they will not support the woman, because for them the family is their community, whereas the woman is an outsider. So that way, until and unless social justice is provided to women who is facing violence, and the children, it is very difficult for the woman to get legal redress, to get justice. So I have written a book on social
Yeah,
justice.
samajik
Yeah,
nyaya.
Samajik Nyaya, that also talks about why social justice, or why support of the society is very important in a woman's life.
Yeah, how the society does not support
Yeah,
her.
and of course, academically, because of that, I got my PhD. So because of the cases that I had seen, I had my PhD on domestic violence in Nepal, and its social, economic, and psychological impact on women. And of course, it gave me an insight into the things that we had not otherwise superficially seen. And it also talks about how domestic violence impacts children. So, when we talk about domestic violence or even violence against women, if we take it very lightly and say, oh, it's between two adults, I would like to differ because the impact is on the child, especially the first child. And in case of domestic violence, it is also said that when a child sees two parents, two adults fighting, the child goes into the mode of this, is it my guilt? The feeling of fear, shame, and guilt. So, what they say is the child suppresses the childhood in oneself. And so there's this concept of the inner child also. So when this child grows into an adult, the unforeseen circumstances the child has faced, because of that the child tries to bring out that inner child in another adult, that is his or her partner. And then there's again another cycle of violence. So my sympathy goes to these children. And when we talk about domestic violence, every parent, every adult, I would say, should be more responsible towards their own offspring, towards their children, because if they are not, they are creating another cycle of violence. Yeah. So
That's true. Ma'am, what are you engaged in, like, at present?
at present, well, this issue of violence against women is so passionate to me. So whatever opportunity I get, I am there. So at the moment, my current engagement is in helping Asman of Tarai Pradesh, Madhya Pradesh,
Madhya Pradesh.
establish their 4 safe homes for victims of violence. So they already have funding for 4 safe homes, but then they don't. Some of them, 2 of them are already partnering with existing organizations, but the other 2 are pretty new safe homes. So I am helping them to learn about how to run a safe home. So this is my most recent activity, and very on the 9th, I'll be going to Madhya Pradesh to train through more activities. The other engagement is now after retirement. We are a professional group of retired women and men who have started an organization called the Angalo Jeshta Jeevan Bahumulya Pratishthan, and we work for the rights of the senior citizens. And in doing so, what we have learned is, as adolescents, the uh, uh, issues that were there, and as adults, so senior citizens also have same issues that need to be addressed. And especially in today's context, when youth are migrating overseas, senior citizens do need a lot of care and sensitivity. So we are working at present. That's my first priority, besides of course teaching.
And
Yeah,
in
and
KSL also.
yeah.
Ma'am, like, when you visited, like, Tarai, we were discussing about child marriage issues.
Yeah.
And what do you find, like, are the more complicated issues in present scenario? Because
Yeah.
we talked about the digital age and the problems which are associated with it. So can you throw some insights on that aspect?
Oh, yes. That's another thing that is emerging issue. Of course, digitization and social media and all this is good for some, but not so good for people who don't know the consequence of it. So what I saw when I was talking to men and women in during our orientation was that the social media has given liberty to everybody to be associated with everyone, and they fall into this trap of attraction and everything without knowing the consequence. So what I heard was, girls, boys, or adolescents, 12, 13, 14, they were running away on their own to get married, eloping. And even for parents, because of this social stigma of the children eloping, they find it easier to get their child married off fast. So there's a lot of child marriage, though law prohibits it. There is actually law child marriage taking place, and a lot of youngsters getting into relationships. And until and unless you are of age or you have legal status of a relationship, law cannot bind you as well. So there is a lot of things that are happening that are not under the purview of law. And especially now, this time I was in the Madhya Pradesh, so I heard from them. And they said, well, parents are migrating for work, young people are at home. So there is a lot of dimensions to it. For instance, young men are migrating for work, sending back money, and that money is being misused. So it's not only women who are being victimized, it's even men in the present day scenario that who are facing a lot of violence and repercussion of how the money is being handled. So it's during the time when we started Sati, it was just talking about violence, but now the dimensions have changed. So there are a lot of other complicated issues that we have not even talked about, or we, until and unless it happens to you, you cannot even imagine what is happening. So there are a lot of emerging issues that are not under the purview of law, and because of that, it is difficult both for men and women, seniors as well as children, to get legal redress. And even with legal redress, it's not easy to go to a court, to go anywhere, because of the stigma attached, because of the social restrictions and all that. So I think we have to be more aware of how and where, which direction the society is going. It's not just enough to have laws in place, because implementation has to be there. Mindset has to be perfect to implement the laws. So I do see a lot of complicated situations, and so we have to be very conscious of that, and we have to never stop working on raising awareness about whatever is there.
Ma'am, last question, like what will be your message for this year's International Women's Day, because it's on coming Saturday?
What is the theme of the International Women's Day?
Accelerate action.
Yeah, accelerate action. So I would say accelerate action to stop violence against women.
Thank you. Thank you so much for coming to Kathmandu School of Law and
Thank you.
sharing your valuable time with us. Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you so much.